Bill, not much going on in Columbus right now, is there?
Yeah, not much at all, right? So we're on day 10, I think, since the initial report, and then we're just going from there. But as I've been telling people, the temperature changes each day, and I'm never quite sure how to feel about whether Urban Meyer will be the coach in week 1 or not.
It definitely, to me, has had that feel of seesawing back and forth. As when the news first broke, didn't think there was any chance he would survive it. He put out a statement that probably had some great publicists behind it that was like, well, maybe he'll find a way to work it out. And then today with the news of Courtney Smith cooperating with this investigation, kind of feels like it might be leaning the other way. What's your feel right now on this?
It's like you said, trying to find the facts and trying to find the truth is so important here because, had you asked me, and I'll walk you through it as quickly as I can, when Brett McMurphy's second report out, I said, all right, 60-40, he's probably going to be fired. And then it kind of calmed down, and I was like, okay, I could see a suspension. I thought Friday afternoon was a disaster. I thought Urban Meyer's statement was more of a dare. I thought Zach Smith's interview was awful. And then, you get into this week, and I'm like, it calmed down again. Then they have a rally last night, which I'll be clear about something. 200 fans doesn't represent a fan base. It doesn't. And, I know the optics of that were terrible, but I still think this is a fan base that the majority of their graduates and fans want to make sure there's truth and transparency. I did have to say that.
Yeah, it would certainly seem like, and this could happen anywhere, that as an alumnus of a university, you wouldn't want your university shed in a negative light, and probably would say a lot of those people out on sidewalks weren't necessarily Ohio State alums, but people who are far more focused on winning football games than they are of their university doing the right thing.
Well, there's passion for college football everywhere, and I'd be remiss to say, I don't have a lot of passion for it too, and I get the football side of it. That's what I cover. That's my strength. Nobody likes to cover stories about this kind of thing. But, as a father, I was thinking about it that I think the worst part of this is that Zach Smith and Courtney Smith's marriage has basically been dragged into the public eye. They have kids, and you got to feel for them. So I think as I wrote for us Friday when all of this happened, no matter what they resolve here, nobody really comes out a winner. And I know Urban Meyer may keep his job and they may win a bunch of football games, but, I'm almost 40 years old, and every Ohio State coach in my lifetime has won football games. It does happen that Urban Meyer, I think this is why where we're at, is after Nick Saban, I think you start the debate that Dabo or Urban is probably the next best at winning football games.
Bill Bender from the Sporting News joining us here on The Game on Tide 102.9. And, Bill, if Urban Meyer does survive this and does hang around for longer than this year, how does this affect him going into the home of a recruit's family going forward?
Well, the one thing he can still sell is getting guys to the NFL, and, he can say he makes mistakes. I just personally, he can't, here's the thing, and I don't know if it sounds like we're kind of on the same page, so I'm going to run this through you and see what happens. I don't know right now as it stands, like with what we have in front of us now, I don't know that it's enough to fire Urban Meyer, especially if he lied to the media, which, I'm sure you've had a couple coaches lie to you too. Yeah. That said, I don't know how you ever believe anything Urban Meyer says ever again. So I think that's where I'm at on this, where it's really tough because both sides are so compelling.
Is there any chance that Urban Meyer is on the sideline for the opener in a few weeks?
I would doubt it. I know some people are saying yes, but I think there has to be some – it would just have a bad look. And that's what this has been from the start. It's been a bad look for Ohio State. And if you do that, it would – well, then you're saying he did no wrong. So I guess the catch-22 here is if he didn't do anything wrong, why is he suspended? But there are other things that work with that. So I would say I don't think he's going to coach the opener. the two options I think are going to happen are A, he's fired or terminated, and they can put whatever language around that they want, or B, he serves some length of suspension. I would think at least two, because I don't think he's going to resign. I think that's what Friday told us. He's not resigning from that job.
Is there any change as far as Ohio State's likelihood to start out the season 4-0 with Ryan Day on the sideline for those first few 2 to 4 games?
It's about getting the Penn State undefeated. That TCU game's not going to be easy, though. And, this is an opportunity no matter what for Ryan Day. It's an opportunity for him right now. Went over to practice today, as Marquise mentioned. It looked like business as usual. I'm sure as you guys, we were laughing about it as it came on. I mean, we got the same as you guys get. We got 2 periods of stretching, but
yeah.
It's an opportunity for him to keep them stable and keep, as a player, I think, it's just about routine, and as long as Ryan Day does that. Now, if he has to coach on an interim basis, that's a different ballgame, because I don't know how you would pick Ohio State to win the Big Ten despite all of that talent with an interim coach, especially in that division that I know you and I have talked about throughout the year as being one of the toughest divisions in college football.
You said you were at practice today. What's your feeling of how this has affected the Buckeye team?
Well, I talked to a former linebacker for them named Bobby Carpenter. He played on the national championship team in 2002. And I kind of asked him that question because he was there when they had the Maurice Clarett situation. And remember, this is a program that went through the same thing kind of in a different way with Jim Tressel. So he said, for the first couple of weeks, it's fine because you're just, you're trying to get to your assignment. You're trying to get to the training table and doing all those things. But as, the weeks go on, it nags on you a little bit. And I think, and as a journalist, I can't believe I'm saying this. I think it was a smart move by Ohio State to not make the players available because they shouldn't have to answer the questions for the adults in charge of them. That's just my personal opinion.
You think there's any chance at all if maybe possibly there's some more out here? I know there's a ton of reporting going on in Columbus right now, so if there's more there, is likely to eventually come out to light. But is there any chance if things go a little further that the NCAA steps out, or do you think Penn State, what happened there years ago, would deter them from stepping in?
I understand the question. Yeah, and I understand that. I don't think so because it seems like this was just something they should have taken care of internally. I suppose they could. But my question to that would be, well, why didn't they get more involved with Baylor?
Yeah.
Baylor was – and I hate doing this because they're all bad, but I don't like saying, one is worse than the other is worse than the other. I think whether it's, child abuse or, sexual abuse or domestic violence, all three of those things are awful, and especially at a university of higher learning. So that's the thing here. Again, I think – I don't know if you get the sense of me telling this, and I'm sorry if it sounds repetitive. I think if Urban Meyer keeps his job, I think to a large amount of people, especially outside of this bubble I live in Central Ohio, are going to feel like he got off, even though technically he didn't do anything wrong other than, misspeak to the media, if he in fact reported it to his superiors, which is another question that really hasn't been answered yet.
Is that we're talking with Bill Bender of the Sporting News, national college football reporter, but based right out of Columbus, Ohio, and in Columbus right now at Ohio State practice today. And Bill, is that going to be a case of Urban Meyer saving his job throughout this statement that came out? I know you said you thought it was a catastrophe for him on Friday. Seemed like he probably had some professional help with that, trying to save face from his end. But that's all stuff. If he did actually report this to his superiors, that you would think probably come to light through freedom of information request forthcoming from the media.
Yeah. And then it's gonna land at Gene Smith's feet, which I thought was also an interesting thing Friday. And the analogy I use is with some of my buddies was if you were asked at your place of employment and you were placed on leave, and I would assume that your company would tell you do not speak to the media, keep this quiet, you're not permitted to do that until this investigation's over. And he didn't do that through the university. He did that through his own Twitter page. So I think that's what made kind of up the ante for this for me. That shows that, he's kind of daring him. That's the way I see it. That, okay, you're going to fire me? Well, I did everything right. Now go prove it. And now you got to go through lawyers. And now you got to deal with all that money that's involved. And like I said, $38 million. I don't know that anybody doesn't think that's a lot of money. And, who would voluntarily leave that off the table. So, and there's Title IX implications with his wife and those kind of things going on. It's a very convoluted case. There's so many layers to it. I think that's, again, good thing that they're investigating it. But no matter what, I don't think there's going to be a decision that this is one of those divisive decisions that I think is going to play out that nobody's happy at the end. And that's why I said I don't think anybody wins.
Does Shelley Meyer, Urban's wife, have a impact on this before the story is all said and done? Obviously, in Brett McMurphy's report, proof through text messages shown that she knew about it, and you would come to think that she would share that with her husband. You think that plays a role in as you were talking about the Title IX implications of her being a Ohio State employee?
Yeah, I mean, that's a factor. I think the one that was early in this process when we were last week, that was one of the things that I thought was one of the biggest issues was that most of us assumed that Urban Meyer knew about those texts that Shelley received, that he knew what was going on, because we would have assumed that Shelley told her husband about it. Now, again, every marriage is different. Every communication system is different when they're in those marriages. But I think we all did jump to that conclusion. That's another fact that I think needs to come out. And obviously, Urban Meyer kind of said, I knew about it, so I reported it properly, which if he's at minimum guilty of lying to reporters in Chicago, again, it's just one of those deals where it's not a good look. I don't know how Ohio State massages that because, again, it comes down to I just don't know who's going to believe Urban Meyer or Ohio State University now if there's no penalty, if there's no clarity and transparency with this investigation moving forward.
Talking with Bill Bender of the Sporting News National College football reporter. And, Bill, before I let you off, obviously another big storyline, the biggest outside of this Urban Meyer story here in Tuscaloosa, the quarterback battle at Alabama. Jalen Hurts inserted himself into the media this past week. Your thoughts on how things will play out here?
I can't believe it's the second biggest story by that big of a margin. The things I saw what he said, obviously, and weighed in on that. I think it's strange that he would weigh in like that. I do get, it's a good thing that he spoke his mind. I do think this is going to be a challenge for Nick Saban to massage this situation. I still think both will play or Jalen will transfer. And maybe this is part of the part that he might transfer at the end of this. But I still think that when Alabama has to pick a quarterback this year and somebody has to take those snaps in a meaningful situation where push comes to shove, that Tua Tagovailoa will be that guy. And, if I'm Jalen Hurts, I'd ride this out, try to win the job. If you don't, stick around and be a graduate transfer. Then you don't have to sit. I think that's the loophole that most quarterbacks have found. And I do think there's a way to make this work. And it doesn't seem, for all this talk, it doesn't seem like it affects the relationship between Jalen and Tua. And that might be the most important factor here.
I'll pose this one last quick question to you because a caller had kind of brought it up right at the bottom of our last hour. And that's if you had to take Alabama or Clemson versus the rest of the field, who would you say your national champion would be outside of those two? Would you take Alabama or Clemson, or going with a Penn State to come up, Ohio State maybe, surprisingly?
No, I wrote that column, and I would take Alabama and Clemson. I just think it makes more sense. I think at some point this season we'll take Alabama. We'll see Alabama Clemson 4, whether it's in a semifinal or a championship game. I get that you're taking 2 against 128, but those are the 2 best teams in the country. And honestly, I would double down to that caller, and I would tell them this. If you had to go to Vegas and just get one playoff team right, just one, and you guys aren't going to want to hear that down there, I still think I'd take Clemson because their schedule's a little bit easier, would be my excuse there. I think their path to the playoff is slightly better, slightly easier than Alabama's, who remember, needed some help last year to get in.